the Nintendo Switch 2 has finally been fully revealed with a Nintendo Switch Direct that happened a couple weeks ago. And honestly, I am super hyped when it comes to the system. I personally think that the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually bringing a lot of cool features when it comes to gaming, as well as some other things that I was really looking forward to when it comes to a handheld device. But not only that, there's a lot of cool things in terms of dock mode that are coming, or at least we thought were coming, but we'll go ahead and discuss that later on in this video. This video is going to be broken up into 3 different parts. Number 1, it's going to be about the specs. We're going to go ahead and talk about what they announced in terms of specs and what it has to offer. The second part is going to be discussing a lot of the misinformation that's out there when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2, because there is a lot of misinformation when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. I can't tell you how much misinformation there is. Fortunately, there was a couple people that have kind of gone ahead and done a lot of investigative journalism. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. And then finally, the final part will be my final thoughts on the Switch 2 and whether I think you should get it or if I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. So let's go ahead and dive in and start talking about the specs of the Nintendo Switch 2. I guess before I dive in, I do want to apologize for not doing a video in over a month. I was in the middle of moving, or rather finding a house and then moving, and there was just a lot going on. So I had to kind of take a break, take a back seat, get all this settled out before I can continue my videos. As you can see, new get up here, new area, of course, because this is a new place that I'm living at. And yes, I don't have my amiibos back there, but they will be coming back soon with another new thing that I have planned for this area over here, somewhere over here, right? But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the Nintendo Switch 2. Visually, when you first take a look at the Nintendo Switch 2, it honestly looks like a Nintendo Switch, just bigger and maybe a little bit more wider, but that is because it now has a 7.9-inch display. Previously, the original Nintendo Switch, not the OLED, but the original LCD Nintendo Switch had a 6.2-inch LCD display, where the Switch 2 now has a 7.9-inch display, meaning the display is a lot bigger. But that is not the only thing about the display. The display is now 1080p, where previously it was 720p, which makes things look a lot clearer, a lot more crisp, because it is at a higher resolution, carrying a higher pixel density because of that resolution. And that may or may not be a good thing. See, what I'm trying to get at is, me personally, one thing that I like about the Steam Deck is because it's 800p, it is a lower resolution. You can kind of give it a little bit more power, meaning you can get a lot higher frame rates because it only caps out at 800p. When we talked about it on the podcast, I was actually fine with a Switch 2 being 720p. Because I felt that if you can just keep it at 720p but give us more power so we can play at a higher frame rate, I would be happy. But Nintendo has decided to opt in for a 1080p display, making that display a lot more crisp. But when it comes to the frame rate, this is actually what kind of shocked me. I was not expecting this at all from Nintendo. Rather than go ahead and just continually using a 60 Hz display, they went and upped it to a 120 Hz display. That's something I was not expecting, and I think a lot of people were not expecting Nintendo to go that route. Because typically when it comes to Nintendo, I would say more recently, they have not been the person to think about power and performance. Old Nintendo, yes, they did when it came to the Super Nintendo, the N64, and the GameCube. Those 3 systems were definitely powerhouses. Yeah, you can go ahead and argue that maybe the N64 was kind of in between, but the N64 itself was a powerhouse. The only thing that held it back was the cartridge. Same thing with the GameCube. Because of what it used, it had those small discs. That kind of held it back as well, rather than opting in for DVDs like the PS2 and the Xbox. But anyways, this was something that I was not expecting at all. They went in and put in a 120 Hz display on the Switch 2, but they didn't even stop there. They added VRR to that display. And that honestly shocked me even more because I was not expecting a VRR display, which stands for variable refresh rate display, on the Switch 2. The great thing about VRR means that if you do have a game that fluctuates with frame rate, which we do know that a lot of Switch 1 games have that issue where it's 60 FPS in certain areas, it might even drop down as low as down into the 20s in certain areas. What this does is helps you out with keeping a more consistent look in terms of feeling how the frame rate goes. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to keep a more consistent frame rate, it just gives a more consistent look, which is pretty neat and pretty good when it comes to the Switch 2. I assume they're thinking ahead as far as it goes to this. But that's not the only thing they did. We talked about the refresh rate, VRR. They also added HDR to the display. Yes, I was not expecting HDR to the display. This is actually pretty awesome because a lot of Nintendo games, in my opinion, will benefit from HDR because of their colorful art style. When you think of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, or any Mario game, including stuff like Xenoblade Chronicles, they have a nice colorful art style to it, and HDR will help make those colors pop even more. So I was actually very surprised when it came to the display being HDR. When we look at comparable handhelds, you have the Steam Deck that does not have a VRR display, but does support HDR and of course a 90Hz display. Then you have the ROG Ally X, which does not support HDR, but does have a 120Hz VRR display. The Switch is kind of like taking both of these things and combining it, being the only handheld that I can think of that has both HDR as well as VRR in it, as well as it being a 120Hz display, which is very interesting. I did not expect this coming from Nintendo at all. So yeah, that's a lot of talking when it comes just to the display itself. And honestly, I think it's pretty big when you really think about it, because the LCD display that was originally on the Switch 1 wasn't really that great. Honestly, when the OLED display came out, it really gave it a breath of fresh air, because I was gonna say Breath of the Wild, but a breath of fresh air, because honestly, it just made everything pop. Everything looked a lot more crisp. And of course, it's an OLED display, things do pop. That being said, this display is an LCD display, not an OLED display. So people are wondering, is it going to be a good display or not? When you look at the ROG Ally X, honestly, that's an LCD display that looks really, really sharp. It's sharper than the Steam Deck LCD display that was previously on there. And I think it's going to look as good as that. There are already previews of people who went to the Nintendo Switch 2 event that actually have compared it to the ROG Ally X, and they said basically it's as crisp as the ROG Ally X, which is something I've been expecting. That is something, of course, I will have to wait and see for myself when I do get my hands on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, when it comes to dock mode, we can expect the same features that this display has available on dock mode, meaning HDR, rather than 1080p. It actually goes up to 4K 60, which is pretty nice. And there's also variable resolutions and frame rates when it comes to dock mode. You can actually play it also at 1440p, and then of course 1080p as well at 60 or 120 hertz. 120 hertz is only supported with 1080p and 1440, while 4K only supports 60 as far as the Switch 2 goes. There is something that a lot of people have noticed that happened recently, and that is that VRR has actually been absent. Originally, when you saw our stream, I did say I saw VRR supported in dock mode. It was originally on Nintendo's website, and it's something I actually called out on Twitter as well. Well, now they've actually removed it from that part in the website, and now we don't know if it's going to support VRR or not. There was also an article, which hopefully is still up, that Nvidia had wrote saying that it supported G-Sync, which is nice. So the version of VRR they're using is G-Sync when it comes to handheld mode. As far as dock, there was no confirmation if it was going to be used there. So that was another thing that was kind of making me wonder, was that actually correct? Was that accurate? Was that just something that they maybe made a mistake on? Again, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe it does support VRR, but they think it's not ready yet, so they have to go ahead and pull it for now. And it'll be a firmware update on the dock, similar to how the Switch OLED dock does allow a firmware update, which is kind of weird because it really doesn't do anything. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. So that's a lot to say about the display and just the dock itself, but there's more to it when it comes to the Switch 2. Like we saw earlier, there are two USB-C ports on the Switch 2. There's one at the bottom that is solely for charging because Nintendo's website said so. And then there is one at the top that is also for charging, but you can connect accessories to that top USB-C port, such as a camera. They did show off the camera functionality on the Switch 2, which is, kind of cool, I guess. I mean, I'm using a camera right here, and I guess when I stream, my camera's usually over there. And I don't know if I'm really going to use that feature, but maybe there's a lot of people that will love that feature. I don't know how many people actually go ahead and use like the PlayStation camera, and I don't even know if you can use an Xbox camera, or if there is an Xbox camera. The Kinect was something back in the days, but I don't even know what's available on Xbox anymore. But anyways, hopefully somebody out there is going to use that feature. This does integrate with the new chat feature that was showed off in the Switch 2 Direct as well. The chat feature allows you to go ahead and kind of get like a Discord-like feel where you can go ahead and invite your friends and kind of share screenplay, or you can just chat with each other or see each other using the camera at a really low, what looks to be like 20 FPS or something like that. I'm not exactly sure why they show that off, because honestly, it does look really bad. But hey, I'll go ahead and try it out and see how it goes when it comes to that feature. But the chat feature, nonetheless, I do think it's pretty cool. It's basically just party chat. It is nice to be able to see kind of like people, I guess. And the main thing is the screen capturing, where you can see each other's gameplay. That I can see myself using that every now and then, or rather when we're streaming, for example. Typically, I use my PC to go ahead and cut out everybody's screen on OBS, and then everybody can kind of see that there. It'll be neat to see how that works with this, because for example, if we decide to play Four Swords again, I can actually use the chat feature so everybody can see everybody's display, rather than have to go ahead and kind of copy everybody's display on Discord and overwork my PC and all that other stuff. So yeah, it's kind of cool that they have that feature, and I'm very interested to see what they add to it, because I can see a lot of fun things happening with this. I know a lot of people are wishing that they just would have just added Discord itself, and honestly, I'm in the same boat. They should have just added Discord and call it a day. But Nintendo likes to kind of do their own thing and see how that works, and I'm grateful for that, because without a lot of things that Nintendo has kind of played around with, we wouldn't be where we're at today as far as gaming goes. Now, you don't need to have the Nintendo camera to kind of use that video feature. You can use just any USB-C camera. As far as what works, I'm waiting to find out. I'm definitely going to try out this Sony camera here at the ZV-E10 Mark II. I'm going to try that out with the Switch 2 and see how that works. I'm also going to try out this Elgato face cam. This was the camera I was using for streaming for quite some time. I'm going to try and test it out with this and see how that works. Because, I mean, it's just USB-C, right? All you have to do is plug it in through a USB-C cable, and it should work, technically speaking. Now, as far as the Joy-Cons go, really the only thing they added was that C button. The thumbsticks have been upgraded, but they're not Hall effect sticks. Pretty much what Nintendo's calling them are glide sticks, meaning they're just a lot smoother overall. They're supposed to be upgraded and better when it comes to drifting, but we'll have to wait and see. There's a bunch of interviews that they were questioning were they Hall effect sticks, and they pretty much said no, it's not Hall effect sticks. Is that a make or break? I don't think so. I mean, in reality, when we look at things, honestly, the Joy-Cons probably had the worst drift ever. Yes, every controller has been subjected to drift. I remember my PS2 controllers, actually just the thumbsticks just kind of like breaking and hanging and just not working. So there are issues when it comes to controllers overall, but the drift issue, it was huge with the Joy-Cons, because just for normal play, it would happen. And hopefully they fix it with this, with whatever they're looking to do. Now, when it comes to the Switch Joy-Cons, I do have the Hyrule, or rather the Skyward Sword controllers, which is basically the Zelda controllers that look like a Master Sword and the Hyrule Shield. I have those Joy-Con controllers, and I have yet to get drift on those. So in my opinion, I do think they probably did figure it out when it came to the Switch, but they're just upgrading it on the Switch 2 to make it just more resistant, I guess, to drift without having to go the Hall effect route. Again, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. We'll have to wait and see really if it is a huge upgrade and how it feels. There are, again, people who have went to the preview event have said that the sticks do feel a lot better. The thumbsticks are also a little bit bigger, which is a huge plus, because the Switch Joy-Con controllers are kind of small and my fingers always did slide off in certain games. Like I remember Xenoblade Chronicles, just moving the camera would have my finger slide off, and I had to continuously reposition my finger because it just kept sliding off. And it was very, very annoying. But luckily, these thumbsticks are a little bit bigger, so I am happy about that, and I can't wait to try out those thumbsticks. Hopefully they're really, really good. The connection of the Joy-Cons themselves to the Switch 2 are now magnetic, so you just kind of pop it in and they magnetize to the edge. It actually brings out the SL and SR buttons, which are on the side of the Joy-Cons, and that's another magnet kind of holds it in place, which is actually pretty cool. They do have a kind of look at how that works, and it looks sturdy enough. A lot of people who have went to the preview event have said that it's pretty sturdy. And honestly, it's something that I feel that Nintendo probably didn't overlook it, but rather they went ahead and knew what they were getting into and tried to design it so there are no issues when it comes to the Switch 2 in terms of it bending or breaking or anything like that. To be honest, when it came to the rail system that the Switch 1 Joy-Cons have, I have seen those go loose over time. I have my Joy-Cons and it would slide in and out, and over time they just wouldn't either A, lock in place, or B, it would start bending a little bit. So if I would hold it with one hand, you can feel it bending some. So I'm hoping that this is a lot sturdier and actually fixes that issue that the Switch 1 had. Again, we'll have to wait and see when it comes out. Now, you might notice that I haven't mentioned any other internal specs because that is, we don't know what it has. There were rumors and leaks saying it does have 12 gigs of RAM, which is a lot more than the Switch 1 has, but none of that has been confirmed yet. This is something that we'll have to wait for somebody to go ahead and tear apart the Switch 2 to actually see exactly how much RAM it has. We do know though it is an NVIDIA chip. NVIDIA did do a press release showing off that this chip also has AI cores similar to their desktop GPUs and utilizes DLSS. I believe it's 3.1. Let me double check that. Yeah, so according to NVIDIA's website, or rather press release, it doesn't say anything actually. So it's not 3.1, I just made that up. It's DLSS though, because it does say it right here where my finger is pointed to. I'm not gonna zoom in, but just trust me, it says DLSS right there. And there's a couple of cool things that they did put in here, such as the AI powered background removal. So that's something that's in NVIDIA broadcast removal, that if you have an NVIDIA GPU, it does AI powered background removal, kind of gets rid of the background. I've used it a couple times while I'm streaming so that my background is not there and you really only see me. Kind of stop because it does tax the GPU a little bit. But this does allow you to do that so that when you're going ahead and sharing that game chat, it removes the background, puts you front and center, and then of course the rest of it, or the rest of your video, is your game, which is kind of cool. Kind of sad that it doesn't say exactly what version of DLSS it's using. It might be some type of, modified version of like one of the newer DLSS versions, but something we'll have to wait and see. The other thing it does mention is it does have ray tracing cores on it as well, meaning that the Switch 2 does support ray tracing. Now, how good would it look? We'll have to wait and see. I believe I saw somewhere that they added ray tracing to Breath of the Wild, but I can't really confirm that. I can't find like that source that I thought I saw it, so we'll have to wait and see as far as that comes. So that's really the deep dive on the specs. I guess I should mention this as far as the dock goes. The dock does have a fan in it, which helps out with keeping the Switch 2 cooler, which makes sense because the Switch 2 is going to be pushing out a lot more power than the Switch 1. So yeah, having a fan inside there will help out a lot, giving it a lot more performance, or rather that performance boost, because the cooler your system runs, the more power it can draw without having to overheat and then kind of underclock itself so that it doesn't heat up. Hopefully those weren't a lot of big words. I assume if you're watching this video, you do understand everything I'm talking about. And if not, definitely leave a comment in the section below and I'll go ahead and try to explain what I'm trying to say, and be sure not to talk like this next time. Now, going back to the Joy-Cons, I did forget to mention that the Joy-Cons now include a mouse mode. We had seen that in the rumors, and of course with the official reveal, we did also see what looked like mouse movement. Well, yes, Nintendo has finally showed off there is a mouse mode with the Joy-Cons. It is compatible with a bunch of games such as Metroid Prime 4, and you will be able to go ahead and use it together with the left Joy-Con being kind of like just how you would move, or you can think of your WASD keys on a keyboard. Honestly, this is actually kind of pretty cool. I'm not sure how much I will use it. We'll have to wait and see. Like when I'm streaming and I have this desk, it makes sense. But a lot of the time I play in portable mode or downstairs in my living room where I don't have a desk, I don't have a table or anything in front of me, which then means that I probably won't use mouse mode a lot. But the feature is cool nonetheless. And there's a lot of cool Mario Party games I saw that utilize mouse mode that has me wondering maybe I should definitely test that out. For sure, we're gonna go ahead, me and the podcast team, as long as every one of us gets a Switch 2, we're gonna play some more Mario Party Jamboree and definitely test out the mouse mode in there. I'm actually excited for that. We'll talk about Switch 2 games later on. But yes, mouse mode is official, does work with games such as Metroid Prime 4. They showed off also, I forgot what RTS game it was. I think it was Civilization they showed off, where you can also use it in mouse mode and basically works like a mouse, right? You know, because it is mouse mode. But yeah, you can use it on RTS games, which makes sense because, I mean, honestly, I grew up playing RTS games with a mouse on a computer, like Age of Empires and things like that. So yes, it makes sense to use a mouse as far as RTS games go. I'm excited to see what they do with this and can't wait to see what they come up with in terms of mouse mode. HD Rumble has also been upgraded. It is now HD Rumble 2, basically more precise, more accurate. It seems like it has a lot better haptic feedback, which makes sense. Honestly, I think the bar is set with the DualSense controller. It has the best haptic feedback I felt in a controller. Games like Astrobot or even other games that I played like Demon Souls use the haptic feedback very, very good. So I'm excited to see how much this has been improved. Is it improved to that level where you can kind of walk and feel your foot, or rather the controller vibrating as your foots are walking on like grass or something like that? Something we'll have to wait and see, and I hope they've improved it quite a bit. Honestly speaking, this is not a make or break deal. If the HD Rumble 2 is not as good as the DualSense version, I'm okay, right? It's not something that I care about 100%, but it's still a cool feature to have nonetheless. Spatial audio is also supported when it comes to the Switch 2. Spatial audio is actually pretty huge. If you haven't played a game that utilizes spatial audio, I highly recommend it. Again, going back to Sony and going back to the PS5, I so far think they have done spatial audio the best. The games that are designed for PS5 just utilize spatial audio very, very good. Yes, PC and Xbox do have a similar version. You can add in DTS or Dolby Atmos to it. But in my opinion, it's not the same because this is utilizing Sony's kind of like own version and it's implemented very, very well. So I hope that when it comes to Nintendo and their version of spatial audio, it's something similar where they can kind of utilize it and kind of, I don't know what's the right word to use. I guess code it that way. But we'll have to wait and see. I hope spatial audio is very good because it is, in my opinion, the best way to enjoy games. I enable DTS on my ROG Ally X, for example, so I can have that spatial audio and it just, you know, it just sounds so crisp. Like everything that I use has to have spatial audio, whether it's my Beats or AirPods or whatever the case might be. It has to utilize spatial audio because everything just sounds cool that way. So that's a quick rundown for the specs. Now let's go ahead and talk about the games. The games, well, there's a lot of them, not really. Honestly, Nintendo did not show off a lot of first-party games in my opinion, but the cool thing is they showed off quite a few upgrades that I'm excited for. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom are both getting upgraded, looking to show off 4K 60 FPS in these games when in TV mode or docked mode, and then of course 1080p and I believe 60 in dock. I couldn't confirm if it's going to be doing 120 hertz or not, or rather 120 FPS or not. That's something that we'll, I guess, have to wait and see. But for sure, it is 4K 60 in TV mode, which is pretty awesome. I cannot wait to finish Tears of the Kingdom in 4K 60. And I probably will replay some of Breath of the Wild to go ahead and see how it looks at 4K 60 or even at a good 1080p 60. Hopefully, it can go up to 120 because that would be pretty awesome. I would definitely play that in handheld mode to see how that looks. But the graphics also have been upgraded. When they did a side-by-side comparison, you can see the textures look a little bit better overall. I'm not sure exactly how much work they put into this upgrade, whether they redid the textures or kind of like amplified it, or if they're using like AI upscaling to make these textures look better. But it does look better overall. So it is kind of cool that they're doing this with older games. I am excited to go ahead and dive in to see what they've done with this. Mario Party Jamboree, And Kirby's Forgotten Land is actually also getting upgraded, but they're adding DLC to it as well, which is kind of neat. If you already own those games, there will be like an upgrade path as well. I do know that Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, if you're already a member of Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pass, you will get those upgrades for free. As far as the other games go, I think they vary. $10 if it doesn't have any extra content, and then $20 if it does. So Mario Party Jamboree and Kirby and Forgotten Land will be $20 extra to get that upgrade, because it gives you the upgrade, which is normally $10, and an extra $10 is the DLC that comes along with that. In my opinion, it's not a bad deal. I know a lot of people are kind of upset about that, but in my opinion, it makes sense because you are getting DLC with this upgrade, so it makes sense. I am actually happy that they're adding more life to these games because it allows you to go ahead and revisit it, but not only that, see the graphics improvements that these games have. I did not play Kirby in the Forgotten Land yet. I do own it. I will be diving into that game once the Switch 2 version comes out. They do have a list of games also that will be getting updated, and these will be free updates to kind of utilize the power of the Switch 2. Now, all you're really going to get with these updates is a higher frame rate and higher resolution, but nothing else. So the actual Switch 2 upgrades, or the Switch 2 edition of the games, looks like they're adding texture upgrades and other features to it, where these other updates will just be performance improvements. What's awesome that's on this list is actually Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, because that can really utilize that update, because I cannot finish Violet because it started getting me very, very motion sick. Just that variable frame rate is just really, really bad. It's not even the graphics, it's the frame rate. I can deal with bad graphics, but bad frame rate and frame rate that fluctuates like that just hurts my eyes. Now, to be fair, I'm not a frame rate guy. I can care less if the game is 30, 60, 120. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is when the frame rate is all over the place, because then my eye notices it, and that does get me sick when it comes to that. So yeah, I am happy that Pokemon is getting updated. A lot of other games are getting updated. We did see Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is getting updated. You might be wondering, why does that have to get updated? Well, if you remember, Bowser's Fury on the Switch 1 in handheld mode only runs at 30 FPS. And if you ever played a Mario game, you don't play Mario games at 30 FPS. Every Mario game has always been 60 FPS. That's a game that I've never played in handheld mode because, yeah, it ran at 30 FPS. I always played it on TV mode because it ran at 60. Or dock mode, whatever you want to call it. I like calling it TV mode, you can call it dock mode, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I'm excited for all these updates. Echoes of Wisdom was another one. I'm actually excited for that because the game is good, and with a resolution bump and a frame rate bump, it will look even more gorgeous. So yeah, I'm excited for that. There's a lot of games in there I'm glad that I'll be revisiting. Yes, the sad news is there wasn't a lot of new games, but there were still some games that were announced. We have Street Fighter 6 Year 1 coming to the Switch 2. That comes with the DLC for the Switch 1, or rather for the Switch 1. Comes with the DLC of Year 1 for the Switch 2, and then of course you can also buy Year 2 DLC for Street Fighter 6 as well. Cyberpunk was also announced for this, which is pretty cool. That'll be coming to the Switch 2 as well. Hogwarts Legacy will be getting updated on the Switch 2. They did show it off a little bit with I believe it was called Creator Voice, I think it's what it's called, where they showed off the updated graphics. And yes, it's a pretty big upgrade when you compare it to the Switch 1. So I am excited for that as well. Of course, from Nintendo, we're getting Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong looks really great. Reminds me a lot of Mario Odyssey, just a little bit different, of course, because you have Donkey Kong. But it does look awesome. I am excited to dive into Donkey Kong. And of course, there was Metroid Prime 4 that's releasing. There's a couple of other games that I'm not really going to mention because they weren't my cup of tea. But there were some other games that Nintendo showed off from first party that you can go ahead and look for yourself. There's one that definitely should have been a pack-in game, and I'm not even going to mention the name because A, I forgot, B, I'm kind of upset that it's not really packed in. That game should have been free. It kind of is a tutorial for the Switch 2, and they're charging you $10 for this tutorial. I don't understand why, but whatever. That should have been packed in to the Switch 2. I also want to mention that Bravely Default has an HD remaster. I'm actually excited for that. I was recently playing Bravely Default 2 because I've been hyped for this HD remaster, but I forgot how good Bravely Default was. Like, honestly, it's an old school style RPG, which, yes, if you're not into old school style RPGs, you might be upset at. But I think it does a really good job of recreating this, but putting a twist to it. And honestly, I'm excited for Bravely Default HD. That is also coming out day one on the Switch too. And no, I did not forget about Mario Kart World. The biggest announcement was Mario Kart World. I am excited for this. It actually is looking to be a pretty big improvement in terms of Mario Kart. There's still stuff that I feel that they haven't shown. We did get a Mario Kart Direct, but it still looks like they kind of just breeze by what we already know or what we saw. But there's still things we haven't seen. For example, we have seen in trailers where it looks like you can kind of go ahead and go on a boat, and we haven't really seen that in action in any of the previews, whether it's the Nintendo Treehouse or this Nintendo Direct to focus on Mario Kart World. We have not seen any of those things yet. So I'm excited to see what they do with Mario Kart World. Hopefully we'll have one more Direct that goes deeper into Mario Kart World before the Switch 2 comes out. So that is everything as far as specs and games go. Now let's talk about this misinformation when it comes to the Switch 2. One thing is the pricing of the games. A lot of people think that here in the US, physical games are going to be $90, while digital is going to be $80, meaning mainly Mario Kart World. That is false. The games will be the same price, both physical and digital in the US. In Europe though, unfortunately, physical is a little bit more while digital is a little bit cheaper. So yes, if you're a physical person, you like to buy physical copies, in Europe, it's going to be more expensive. As far as it goes over here in the US, you do not have to worry about that. It would be pretty much the same price wherever you buy it. The other thing I want to mention is the digital game cart. There is a digital game cart that is available for certain games. What this means is, let's say for example, you had games on Switch 1 that only came in the box was a code for you to download a game. That was it. Once you downloaded a game, that was really it. You couldn't do anything with said game. It was just done, it was there, and yeah, it's there. That's it. With the digital game cart, what that allows you to do is you can easily go ahead and pop that into your Switch 2. It downloads the game, but if you want to let somebody borrow that game, you just give them that digital game cart, and now they have access to the digital, or rather, they have access to that game. So technically speaking, it does work like a physical cart, except that the full game is not in there. Now, yeah, for some people it might make or break whether they buy a game physical or not. I think the concept and the idea is kind of cool, but I also understand that at that same time, it's like, why buy the digital game cart when you can just buy a digital? Because Nintendo has announced a way to share digital games now, which is also kind of cool, where you go ahead and just share it between people and they can hold it for, I believe it's up to 14 days before it comes back to your Switch. That is also actually pretty awesome. But if I remember correctly, I think it's only for people in your family plan, so you can't share it with everybody. They have to be on your family plan. I might be wrong on that. I might have to double check. I'll see if I put a note on this video if I'm wrong. But if I'm right, that is kind of not the best way to share. It's kind of cool to share it, right? But not the best way, where a digital game card, you can just hand it to anybody and now they have access to the game. But the other thing is you can always resell that game as well. So if you want to go ahead and resell a game like, let's say, Street Fighter 6, you can go ahead and pass it to them and now they have access to that game and you save some money, right? So yeah, there's that too. So there is both a good and a bad view when it comes to the digital game card. Now, one thing that a lot of people are pretty controversial about is the pricing just overall. The Nintendo Switch 2 being $450 or $500 with Mario Kart World, and of course Mario Kart World being $80 is kind of pretty big. A lot of people are upset at that, and honestly, let me break it down in two parts. When it comes to the Switch 2, I think $450 is the right price. These specs and what it's bringing to the table from what we can see is well worth $450. Again, I have an ROG Ally X that's $800, and this looks to be at least on par with the ROG Ally X. So if it's giving me that amount of power and that amount of performance, then I'm all in. This is pretty awesome. It looks like it might be a little bit more powerful than the Steam Deck. Can't really say for sure. It's something that, again, we'll have to wait and see when the Switch 2 is actually in our hands and we're testing out games. But if it's a little bit more powerful than the Steam Deck, then it's a huge plus. There were some comparison videos when it came to like the Switch 2 and the Xbox Series S, and it kind of showed the Switch 2 being a little bit more powerful, or actually a little bit better in graphics. That is something that, if true, is a pretty big plus, meaning that you're getting a portable Xbox Series S for $450. And for me, that makes sense. Now, yes, Digital Foundry also did a comparison and compared it to the PS4 and said that it was, on par with PS4, if not a little bit better. I don't know how I feel about that comparison. It's something that, again, we have to wait till we see it in our hands and actually get direct footage out of it, and also see the gameplay mechanics, or rather gameplay improvements in terms of this. A huge deal is 120 FPS. You cannot do that on the PS4, where you can do that on the Switch 2. So that is a big plus. Meaning everything that the Switch 2 has overall is pretty huge. So I don't think it's comparable to a PS4. It's definitely more on par with the PC handhelds, and it might be, better in some ways and maybe not as good in some ways. So for $450, it makes a lot of sense in my opinion. And as far as games go, I agree that $80 is a lot for a game, and especially with the way the economy is and everything is going over here in the US, I understand $80 is a lot. When I saw the price point of Mario Kart World, I was like, oh man, like I invest a lot of money into stuff trying to grow this channel. So yes, $80 is a huge hit. Like $80 is what I use to buy a retro handheld, right? That's the money that I put towards that, and I have to put it towards the game. So I get it, but at the same time, I like to look at it in the reverse way and see, we've had $60 games for years. Just recently it went up to $70, and technically speaking, when you really look at it, we should be higher than that. $60 games, just to put into perspective, goes all the way back to the Xbox 360 era, which I believe was what, like 2006, if I'm not mistaken. So for about 20 years, maybe it was 2007, something like that, but I know it's close to 20 years, we've been paying $60 for games. And with inflation and how everything has risen in price, but games haven't, then yeah, like it makes sense for games to be more expensive overall. Now we can go into a whole argument about, well, yeah, the prices are going to be, go up. Game developers are not going to get paid more. It's really the corporate people, they're going to get all that money. Yeah, I get that. But in the way of things are, it makes sense for it to go up. And honestly, we'll have to wait and see how everything runs out. Now, Nintendo says they're eyeing out every game, so not every game will be $80. They're going to look at every title and the amount of work they put into those titles and kind of price them accordingly. If you remember, Tears of the Kingdom was $70 when it came out on Switch 1, and they set it for that. And then, of course, we see it here kind of being the same thing. I will say this, I agree, Mario Kart World has yet to show me why it's worth $80. So hopefully there's one more direct to show off why it's worth $80. So let's dive into my final thoughts when it comes to the Switch 2, because I know this video has actually been kind of long, longer than what I thought it was. I honestly think that the Switch 2 is a win. I think everything they announced as far as the console goes is pretty huge. It's a nice upgrade. Yeah, some people are complaining just to complain. I know Shuei Yoshida went ahead and talked about how this doesn't feel very Nintendo. But in my opinion, it does feel very Nintendo. It actually feels a little bit more old school Nintendo. When you had that power jump from the N64 to the GameCube, it really was just a power bump. There was really nothing gimmicky as far as the GameCube goes. Instead of, I guess you can say like the looks, right, of it being cube. But outside of that, there was nothing gimmicky about the GameCube itself. Here you do have some of those gimmicks, such as mouse control. You have the party chat, which seems to be, or not party chat, but like the video chat feature, which seems to be pretty gimmicky when it comes to that. And that's about it. Everything else was just an upgrade from the Switch 1, which I'm okay with. I think I've said it many times, especially on the podcast, that all I need is a more powerful Switch to play more of my games. Yes, I do use my ROG Ally X. I mentioned that quite a lot. That was my main handheld for the longest time. But I really do love my Switch. I like how light and portable it was. I mean, I guess the ROG Ally X is portable too. But you kind of get it. It's a smaller form factor. It's lighter. It's not as heavy. And it's nice to have something that small. I've been playing my Switch a lot more recently. Kind of preparing myself for the Switch 2. And every time I go back to it, I just really remember how much I like about the Switch. And I'm excited the Switch 2 is just an upgrade of the Switch 1. So yes, I will be getting it day one. And hopefully I'll get it, because pre-orders, as the time of this recording, pre-orders are tomorrow night, or rather Thursday morning. So tomorrow's Wednesday, so Thursday morning, I will be trying to go ahead and get that. We'll be live streaming me trying to get that. So I don't know when this video is going up, whether it's going up tomorrow or Thursday. More than likely, it's probably going to go up Thursday. So I will write in the comment section below if I went ahead and got myself a pre-order, or you can watch me live streaming it tomorrow to see if I got my pre-order. I will be all over that. But let me know in the comment section below, are you going to go ahead and pick up the Nintendo Switch 2, or is it too much money, or you're just not really feeling the console? I definitely will be picking it up day one, and I also will be doing a stream once I get mine, a very long stream, doing a deep dive on the Switch and just everything it has, going through buying games, just seeing how fast it downloads and all that other fun stuff, and just kind of seeing what it brings to the table. So I am excited for that. Make sure you subscribe to get a notification on that stream, and also subscribe because I will also be doing a video on my thoughts on the Switch 2 once I go ahead and get it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Follow over on Twitch, as I do simultaneously stream on both YouTube and Twitch. I haven't done it on TikTok in a minute, and that's because what I was using, because I was not streaming for quite some time, it kicked me out of TikTok streaming, so I couldn't stream on TikTok. But hopefully I'll get back to that for anybody on TikTok that came over from over there. But yeah, my name is James. I'll catch you guys next time.